Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of telling titles, looking at songs whose titles tell you exactly what you're getting in store for. We're checking out Gloryhammer, The Fires of Ancient Cosmic Destiny. I'm expecting something fairly epic here. It is 12 minutes long, so I'm guessing we are having a musical epic. But I'm really hoping for something rather grand in gesture as well. So, let's dive into this and see what Gloryhammer is bringing to the table today. Got the choir and the vocals, choir and the violins on the same line there. Oh man.
And the battlefield of Cowdenbeath fell silent as the black gates of the fortress of Crail.
I have never heard Gloryhammer use any harshes.
Dead eagles, the grim armies of the death knights of Crail rode out to meet the forces of justice. And at the vanguard of this terrible host stood the Grand Master himself, Dreadlord Prometheus.
The sheer passion, though, is infectious. So we're back on this idea from our previous verse, I think. Beautiful harmony. Yes, I love how they're they're bringing in the strengths of both the metal and the classical elements there. That trumpet. Kind of a folkish thing going on here. You know what it sounds like is Dave Grohl's Satan from Tenacious D. Yes, nice tonal shift here.
From the heavens comes a hero, mighty Hootsman.
Similar to the intro. Almost sounds like a choir narrator from musical theater. Something the Greeks used to use a lot, if I remember right. Wow. I don't know if it's that specific synth tone, but I got some really heavy, old school video game music vibes. The synth is in line with the vocals here. Very faintly off to the left.
The valiant hero Angus MacFife realized he had been impaled by the knife of evil. As he watched the lifeless corpse of Sargothrax dissolve into liquid dust, Angus knew that soon he himself would be corrupted by the dark power of that cursed blade. And so he resolved that he must make the final sacrifice for the glory of Dundee. He would end his own life by descending.
I love that they gave the bass the lead on this. Kind of thrashy right here, especially with the pedal note writing. really interesting counterpoint, I think, coming from a guitar on the right side. 16th note picking. Interesting, going for the somber ending. Bittersweet, maybe? Going for a tense ending.
Initiating interdimensional subspace relay. Target year 1022. Begin transmission.
Morse code.
Transmission complete.
What? Fires of Ancient Cosmic Destiny. That was quite a track. Um, well, I think we got to get the elephant out of the room first, and that's the fact that I think this is, uh, it's a story song, right? Interestingly, we seem to have two narrators, I think. We have the choir, which kicks us off at the beginning, and we return to several times. It reminds me of the way that the Greeks used choirs as narrators as well in a lot of their stage plays and musicals. Um, but then we also have that the harsh vocalist as well, which I think was supposed to be a character, but their final verse seemed to be more of an omniscient narrator style from the few words I picked up. I could have misunderstood what was being said too, but um, yeah, and then it's. And then we had that moment where said somebody got stabbed by the blade of darkness or something, and then like we went back to the main vocalist and they were singing about their death or something like that. I don't know. It feels very story based though, very narrative driven, and I wonder. The music is certainly epic, right? And we'll dig into why it's epic, but it is epic. So it matches the title quite a bit, but I wonder if lyrically, once we get into this, be like, oh, it all makes sense. The story is about cosmic destiny and it colliding now or something. I don't know. But I think even on the purely musical level, there's an epicness on it that, for the most part, meshes with the title of the track. Though it is epic in like a an 80s B flick kind of idea. Where I mean that's just Gloryhammer though. They're cheesy, right? They're campy. And so this might not be epic with a capital E for everybody, but they're definitely aiming for epic sounds. Whether you find it epic or not, their intention is clearly to make something larger than life. And the title goes along with that rather well. So let's get to the music. Let's get to the music. A lot of this is pretty typical power metal. Um, we have shreddy guitar solos, shreddy organ solos, or I guess they're technically keyboard solos, but sorry. So we have the shreddy guitar solos. We have a lot of pedal note writing, whether it's elongated sections of just the pedal note writing, like under the guitar solos, or if they're used a bit more sparingly, where we have, you know, 2 to 3 beats per bar of pedal note writing, and then we have punctuated ideas within the bar rather than just simply at the end of a phrase. They're still utilized a lot. We have the very big, vibrato-y vocals that I tend to associate with power metal and what is stuff like Dio and Judas Priest. What genre is that? I don't know. A type of metal though. But yeah, it's these very big, bombastic, throaty vocals. A lot of it is resonating in the back of the mouth rather than the front of the mouth. And there's usually, whenever they hold a note, you get a really wide vibrato. Very I'm not going to say it's specific to this genre, but it's widely used within it. Um, the drums shift from uh, sparser ideas to driving ideas. We have a bit of a thrashy concept going on a couple of times. The general idea, though, is that they are rigid and simplistic in design. The thrashy, well, okay, so we can take the thrashy drums to illustrate this a little bit. They're not easy to play. Tons of endurance, tons of concentration, tons of precision required, but it's also just 16th note bass kicks with quarter note snare and closed hi-hat. It's two ideas, and one of them is just multiplying one rhythm by four. That's it. They're simplistic in design. They're difficult in execution for sure, but the underlying concept, what's written on the paper, is rather simple, and it is a one beat phrase that gets repeated over and over. And that's what the drums are a lot of. They're simple and rigid. There's not a lot of room for interesting cymbal work, for fancy rhythmic ideas, for polyrhythms or polymetric ideas. Um, there isn't really a lot of room for flourish or ornamentation. A lot of the drumming is very functional. And I've noticed a bit of this in power metal as well. In a sense, even the guitar work is functional, where a lot of it is pedal tone based. You get the bite of the guitar, and that's really all you need for the section, and then you have a little lick at the end of your phrase or at the end of your bar to create contrast or to give it a little bit of extra power. But again, it's for the function of it. The notes you're playing really don't matter as long as you're playing the right key. And key is important because power metal has these, I don't know, the melodic ideas have folk and, well, I guess that's it, right? They have folk concepts to them, which kind of introduce elements of fantasy in my mind, which perfectly, it works well for Gloryhammer. They sing about unicorns and stuff, so having a fantasy uh, adjacent sound, definitely works. But I think that as long as you have a folky idea going on, the specific notes you're playing don't really matter as much as the sound of your guitar, what kind of stuff you're making with it rhythmically and texturally. And so when you look at just the metal aspects of this track, they're exceptionally functional. Even when we look at the vocal melodies, there's nothing too egregious or eye-catching, ear-catching about them. Um, they're kind of expected, typical for the genre. Not a bad thing at all. But even like at the beginning, and we'll kind of dive into this a little bit about using iterative design to fully explore a innovative concept. But I mean, you may have noticed at the beginning of this track when I was moving my body to the music and conducting bits of it, I was most of the time I was nailing new ideas and new accents without having heard the repetition yet. A lot of this is as expected. It's iterative ideas, and that's true in the vocal melody. It's true in a lot of the isolated musical ideas. On the whole, it's really difficult to figure out where a 12-minute song is going, but moment to moment, ideas make perfect sense. Um, and so a lot of the a lot of the metal elements tend to be very safe and expected and iterative and functional. None of them really going outside of their lane to do anything interesting on their own. Even when we get to the guitar solo, which shifts up a lot of the pedal tone writing for shred, we have changed directions pretty strongly, but the shredding is also pretty much expected. There wasn't anything in there that surprised me. And if the band had stopped there and had just written a power metal track, I might have found it a little underwhelming given how safe everything was, but they didn't. There's a second aspect to this track, and that is um, the orchestra. As I had mentioned, the orchestra is also kind of iterative. There's a lot of ideas and directions that it goes in and utilizes that are kind of what I would expect for the style of music they're playing and the instruments they have available to them. Our strings tend to follow specific chordal patterns. They also tend to be the chordal foundation. Despite sitting at the top of the song, they lead the band and typically follow along with some other melodic idea as well, usually what the vocals are doing. In fact, there's several occasions that when the vocals finally get away from chordal work and they work with melodic ideas, it's the same melody the choir is singing. Um, and so we see a lot of ideas in here that on the orchestral side that make perfect sense. If you've listened to any sort of larger epic style of music and you're familiar enough with it, you're going to hear ideas, themes, concepts, musical directions that you kind of were anticipating. Maybe you didn't call it exactly, but you're like, yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting them to do. Um, but what all of this iteration does, utilizing ideas that have come before them in ways that are similar to the ways that have come before them, is allow everything to, one, feel very palatable. I think the song is very digestible, even if you don't listen to this style of music. Um, and that being, metal. Um, and two, it allows everything to come together nice and neat. There wasn't any section in this track that challenged me in any way, but there also wasn't any section of this track that I felt fell apart or bounced off of me or I thought didn't work for whatever reason. When you're working with tropes like this and everything sort of is rather functional, it's very easy to place things where they need to go and not really make any mistakes in that area. The thing with experimentation or innovating ideas and musical concepts is that you don't have a groundwork, you don't have a manual, basically. You're kind of going at it on your own. And we see, I don't know if I should call them mistakes, but through experimentation is going to be failures. And failure might sound a bit harsh, but whenever somebody creates something new, there's going to be rough elements. I think that's a good way to word it, right? They're not failures, they're just rough elements. And as other bands begin to iterate on it, and even the band itself that has created it begins to iterate on it, they can soften down the harsh edges, the sharp edges, and refine it into something that is really well done, where everything works together. That is the benefit of playing iterative music, is that you have this roadmap of everyone who's come before you to say this works really well together, this works really well together, this works really well together. And so you can write music like this that isn't challenging, but also isn't difficult to listen to. And when you're writing a 13-minute song, the last thing you want to do is have somebody decide to turn it off at minute 3 or 4 because you've kind of fumbled a couple ideas up to that point. And when you're fumbling ideas during the build-up, you also haven't really hit your peak yet. You have a higher chance of losing listeners. That's not to say that every epic needs to work within iterative ideas, but it definitely takes a lot of weight off your shoulders if you're going to make something as big as this with as many sections as this, especially with what I perceive to be an emphasis on the lyrics, anyways, to really work within tried and true function and form in order to facilitate music that sounds what you want, even if it's not groundbreaking. It sounds like what you're going for, and it allows your story, your lyrical story, to be told. And through all that, it is honestly the perfect way to go about crafting this song. Is it going to blow anyone's mind? No. Does it do what it needs to do? Yes. It sounds big, it sounds epic, and it allows the vocals to have a vehicle to be sung over. That's a weird metaphor. Um, I don't think I took that where I wanted to when I started it. And what is the story here, though? I don't know about the story lyrically. We haven't dove into that yet. Musically, though, it starts off very big, very epic, and we have what I perceive to be the narrator choir coming in early. We are introduced to the story, I'm going to assume, and then our vocalist comes in and we are in the story, I think. Musically, it is big, it is large, it is driving. There really isn't a point of this song where things dip down in tempo and intensity. It is just a big moment all the way through. It is called The Fires of Ancient Cosmic Destiny. I'm going to assume fires is, well, we have fire being energy, like having a fire in your belly, having that that passion and drive to do something, which falls in line with the intensity of the music. But fires are also destructive. This could be a clashing of things. Ancient cosmic destiny. Destiny is usually, especially in stories, which I'm assuming this is, usually has to deal with conflict. You are destined to stop this evil and stuff like that. And the word evil came up a couple times. There's a blade of evil or something like that. Um, so there definitely could be a very black and white, good versus evil kind of thing going on here. Um, in which case, cosmic is large, ancient is large. They're both modifiers that speak to a grandiosity of the destiny. And then the Destiny, if we go back to the idea of fires of clashing, this is probably some sort of clashing of cosmic powers. That is a massive topic. And it could even be the ending. This could be the, the Luke versus Vader fight at the end of Return of the Jedi. Um, it is supposed to be big and wild through the entire track, is kind of what I'm getting at. Um, but it ends on a somber note, which I thought was interesting. I don't know where this sits. Let me check real quick. Where does this sit on the album? Oh, wow. In the middle? Oh wait, no. The end. Okay, so this album list is for the deluxe version, and it also has the symphonic versions of all the tracks. But I think the original release was 10 tracks, and this is track 10, which would make it the end of the album. So yeah, the idea of it being a big battle at the end, it's called Legends from Beyond the Galactic Terror Vortex. Assuming that this is about this big battle where destinies collide. Did our hero die at the end? Is that what happened? I remember they got stabbed by a blade. I don't remember after that though. But is that what happened? Is that why it was somber? But then it got eerie, intense, and we had this really dramatic, dissonant tone that led into another narrator that led into dial-up tones, both the phone and the modem. And there was Morse code. I completely forgot about the ending. I just remembered all this and like, what does any of that mean? I don't know. I think that one's gonna be outside of my scope. I think that's gonna be more lyrically. What's the word I want? Located, not musically. So I think that's gonna be about the end of my musical reading of this then. Um, it's a lot of iterative ideas, both on the string section and on the metal section. It's comprised of a lot of driving energy throughout and keeps a consistent emotion throughout the entire track. We do have some ups and downs where we move between choirs and different vocal types, but I think it's all there to support the narrative story, the lyrical story at hand. Which is why we have so few instrumental sections, why we have so few musical embellishments and ornamentation going on, because the music really is not that important. That comes off a bit. I don't want people to read into that. The music is secondary to the lyrics. It's there to craft the emotion of the section, but the story itself, being told by the vocalist, is the most important part of the track, is kind of my feeling on it. So if the lyrics are that important, let's find out what they're saying. This is something. We start off with the chorus, which I believe was sung by the choir. It says, "In the fires of ancient cosmic destiny, evil will rise, and of all the legendary warriors, none will survive. To defeat the power of the sorcerer, great sacrifice." We then move to part 2, the Battle of Cowdenbeath. And there's some stuff that goes on here, and then we have an interlude by Zargothrax. And I think this was the growling vocals. And then there's a third part, Return of the Astral Demigod of Unst, the Mighty Hootsman. And then part 4 is the knife of evil. I don't know why I kept saying the blade of evil. But it was thrust into the hero, Angus McFife. And then Angus dies. and the chorus is rewritten to include this. To defeat the power of the sorcerer, the Prince of Fife must die, instead of saying a great sacrifice. And at the second time through, it says, to save the galaxy, it is your mighty destiny, brave Angus McFife. And then we move to part 5, which is the transmission, which is when things got eerie. And in Morse code, it translates to activate Zargothrax clone Alpha 1. I read through all of this. A lot of it went over my head, because not because I didn't understand the words or anything. It's actually written out pretty clearly, but because there's a lot of people and places and events that are referenced that I'm sure make sense if you've kept up with this story. Um, but I also read the Genius annotation, and this is just bonkers. Even though Sir Proletius and his Death Knights of Krail had been defeated, the power of Zargothrax was still growing exponentially, and it seemed now that even with the renewed power of the Hammer of Glory, the forces of justice would not be able to defeat him. Suddenly, when all seemed lost, a flash of holy light lit up the entire sky, and a being of unimaginable power descended from the heavens. It was the Hootsman. Angus realized he was the mysterious third entity he had encountered in the wormhole. The force of the detonation from his nuclear heart had not killed the Hootsman, it had merged the essence with the very fabric of reality in the terror vortex, and he had transformed into a god. It is phenomenal in like the best worst kind of ways. It feels like a really interesting midsection of Saturday morning cartoons, like 80s pulp comic book stories, and just general over the top fantasyness. Not the rooted, serious fantasy stuff of modern day, like with stuff like Game of Thrones, but I'm thinking of older fantasy writing, stuff like Dragonlance, where we have names. What is it? Zargothrax. What a name. The Hootsman, which is both comical. I mean, it's silly in one way. It makes me think of an owl person. I am the Hootsman. And it also is just really kind of silly to say because hoot has just like a lot of airiness to it. The H with the double O. Um, it's just, I don't know. There's a lot of silliness to it. Some of it almost feels tongue in cheek, where it's intentionally over the top campy. I mean, he detonated his cosmic heart inside of a wormhole. What does any of that mean? Oh, sorry, it wasn't just a wormhole. It was the reality of the terror vortex. Um, yeah, it's, I don't know. It also says that the Hootsman would bring the justice of Hoots to Earth. And it's silly in all the right ways, while also taking itself way too serious for the silliness at hand, at least the silliness in the naming, which again kind of gives me that pulp comic concept to it. Um, does it match the music? Yes, in so many ways. It is just as campy as the music implies. It is also sort of derivative while also doing its own thing. I don't know if that perfectly pairs up with the we're going to make our own story out of iterative concepts thing going on in the music, but I do see some loose parallels there. It is also about this epic fight between our hero Angus McFife and the big old villain Zargothrax. His army's been wiped out, but he still has power, and the Gloryhammer, sorry, the Hammer of Glory, might not even be enough to stop him. It takes a god, the Hootsman, to come down. Um, and so it's epic but campy and serious but silly all at the same time. And I think the music embodies a lot of that as well, while also just being a really good soundtrack to the events, figuring out what the right emotion is for it. And that's where we get our strange ending. It doesn't really make sense musically, but if you look at this as um like a musical radio drama where the stories are told in song rather than in spoken word. Having the music there helps sell the mood, and so when the mood changes to a cliffhanger, you gotta change the music too. This is wild. I knew Gloryhammer was campy. I knew they wrote fantasy stuff. I'm going to assume this is based, I mean, this story, there's so many things here that it references. I have to guess come from other tracks or maybe either other songs. Is this a concept album? Maybe. The first track is called Into the Terror Vortex. The eighth one is called Hoots Force. The seventh one is Gloryhammer. I think it's possible that this is a concept album. Where did that accent come from? Um, and it makes me want to listen to it. It really does. That's weird. But I feel like this is right up my alley. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on Gloryhammer's The Fire of Ancient Cosmic Destiny. What did you think? Put your thoughts down in the comments. Did you enjoy it? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything that I didn't touch on you thought was worth talking about? I don't know. Let me know. Comment section. Above the comments, in the description box, is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, a way to support the channel, links to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have two more videos ahead of us today, as expected, on Fridays. A creator request and a special selection. We have an album review tomorrow, the live stream on Sunday morning for patrons, and then we'll be back Monday with next week's theme of dark ambient, which I don't know if we're exploring the genre dark ambient or the style of music of just dark and ambient, but I guess we'll explore that theme when we get there on Monday. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.